If words are powerful, images are even more powerful, especially when they come from an authoritative source such as a school book, a professor, or a university. Images contained in books, videos, visual presentation and MOOCs trigger the way we understand the world around us, a world that often we have not experienced yet. Imagine a little child growing up reading an illustrated science book where the mascot used to represent the scientist is an old man with grey hair, which can be, of course, but is just one of the options. At the end of the book, the expectation is very likely to be having a science teacher like that. This is just an example to recall that the images containing different media can be decisive. They can help you make every content more appealing, and they also help our brain to better picture reality. That's why if someone represents reality using images without a conscious reflection on their discriminatory power, through them we can unconsciously develop a biased representation of reality. And if we don't have the chance to challenge this perspective, it might affect our expectations, influence our choices and the way we treat others. Visual designers producing educational content have a huge responsibility. We have discussed a lot among FOST1 project members and in our internal MOOC team about the concept of gender balance images. It is not easy and almost impossible to universally define an image as gender balance. We did a sort of experiential test, and looking at the same image, some colleagues found it gender balance, some others didn't. I'm still wondering why. Maybe it was dependent on sex, sensitivity, age, socio-cultural context, and many other factors. Furthermore, we were all European around the table. What could have happened if we had been a group of people coming from different parts of the world? Having said that, we know that some images must be simply avoided. For instance, any image that might induce a sexualized perspective should not be included. Also, every image that represents a woman in a subordinate perspective must generally be carefully used or used just in an appropriate context. Look at this image coming from a stock library. It is a standard situation in the office. The boss is a male and the secretary is a woman. What about this one in which the roles are inverted? We cannot say always avoid the first one and always use the second one because it depends on the context. If you need to use a picture describing reality as it is now, sometimes you are forced to use stereotype images. Otherwise, you can broaden the perspective to depict a different reality. By choosing a representation that is different from the norm, you give the girls the possibility to imagine themselves in roles different from the ones that society generally attributes to them. The use of colors also requires our attention. In the 40s, pink emerged in the fashion industry as a color for girls and blue as a color for boys, at least in some cultures. If you want to create a gender-balanced visual identity, it can be a good idea to overcome this polarized association. Let's look at an example in a MOOC about diversity. This image has been used in this MOOC because it was relevant in relation to the specific context. The teacher was mainly saying the things we just mentioned about this use of colors, where pink is associated with girls and blue with boys. But in the rest of the MOOC there is a more neutral icon to indicate women and men, and more neutral colors are used. By the way, the woman is in blue. Long story short, when speaking about images, the boundaries become blurred, and it is less possible than ever to say this is right or this is wrong. But I'm sure that these concepts are not new for visual designers. On the contrary, I imagine they are already part of their daily work routine. As a visual designer, your role requires you to choose the best image or graphic according to the specific context, always questioning if it is appropriate and respectful of everyone's diversity. Be careful. Watching things from the opposite perspective, also men can be discriminated. Think about many contents associating men with certain kind of roles, particular movements and the strong man way of being. Too much of this content could make them feel strange if they don't look the same in real life. But this is another complex topic. I just wanted to recall the fact that we need to find the balance, and falling from one to the other side of it is very easy. If this is the context, how can we progress? These are some suggestions and tips coming from visual designers working on a daily basis in the MOOC field when we ask them to wear their gender balance glasses. One of the first things to do is to spend some additional time getting to know the MOOC topic better. Try to find out who is involved in the topic you are dealing with, and feel free to start finding open images while doing that. This process might seem a waste of time at first, but it will actually ease your work later. In addition, it will make the work more interesting and exciting for you, since you'll be more familiar with the topic. Try not to look for a generic image of an actress or stock websites playing the role of a scientist, but check if there are images of real people doing the real job. In the materials of the course you will find some repositories that we consider a good starting point. If during your research you don't find gender balance images, ask yourself why and wonder if you can produce them directly. A good practice is to create, whenever possible, photo and video material yourself, especially if you struggle to find the images you need. In this way, you can have much more control over the output and even save time in the long run. If you want, you can save the images for other MOOCs and start creating your own database, or consider sharing it with an open license in order to allow other people to reuse it. Try to also ask the people you are working with if they have images that you can use and that better represent a gender balance reality. Talking about graphic elements, they are one of the easiest ways to fall into stereotypes. Think about the bathroom icon. Do you think that a person wearing a skirt can represent women properly? When finding or producing graphic content, pay attention to the objects and environments you choose to give a general representation of real things. Last but not least, try to include and select not only gender balance images, but also be correct in terms of age, ethnicity, physicality, beliefs, and so on. A well-balanced MOOC is not only politically correct, but provides a better representation of reality. It can inspire people to follow their natural inclination, no matter their gender.